Two women were walking out of the church after Mass one Sunday morning, discussing the homily that their priest had given, extolling the virtues of marriage. The priest had spoken glowingly of the unity, the love, and the holiness of marriage. One woman said to the other, "That was a beautiful explanation of marriage that Father gave today, don't you think?" "It was," her friend replied. "I only wish I knew as little about it as he does." There may be more jokes and humorous stories about marriage than there are about any other subject. In part, that's because marriage is such a common experience in our society, and I suppose in part because it's easy to joke about, especially if you've never been there. It's also easy, though, for us to trivialize the relationship of marriage, which also allows us to trivialize divorce. In our society, divorce is presented as a trivial bump in the road of life, the plaything of the rich and famous, instead of the traumatic, life-changing, painful experience that it is for so many. The words of Jesus make it clear that it is not a trivial matter at all. It's important. And make no mistake, Jesus means what he says today. The key for us is to understand what it is Jesus is saying. The message of the Scriptures, this gospel today, is not just for those who have been married, or are married, or might get married. It's for all of us, even those who will never marry. So let's be clear first about what Jesus is not talking about. In the first part of the gospel, he's not talking about people who end their marriages because they find themselves in abusive, violent, destructive relationships that leave them angry, unhappy, or stripped of their dignity. Any more than in the second part of the gospel, he's talking about to his disciples about being childish. What Jesus is calling for here is respect for ourselves and for each other, and ultimately for God. To understand Jesus' words, we have to understand the culture of his time. We're all familiar with the phrase, "women and children first," supposedly put into practice whenever there's a dangerous, life-threatening situation. In Jesus' time, the thinking was just the opposite, at least in regard to social standing and day-to-day life. Women and children last was the operating principle in daily life. And the examples that Jesus uses in the gospel today are examples of who were considered to be the most insignificant people in society. The examples in the gospel underline that attitude. Men could legally divorce their wives for any reason whatever, without even telling them what it was, and with no moral or legal obligation to them. In their attempt to trick Jesus in contradicting Moses, they reveal their selfishness and their lack of respect for the dignity of women. And later, the disciples will do the same thing as they try to keep those insignificant, unimportant children away from Jesus. Jesus embraces them, welcomes them, and treats them with respect. What God has joined together, let no one divide. Those words heard in the Scriptures today are part of the marriage ceremony, and the vows of marriage are recognized then as a sacramental bond between a man and a woman. The Word of God today challenges us to a broader understanding of this, not only for husbands and wives, but for all of us. What God has joined together, us to Him and us to one another, should not be separated. That's the foundation of all our relationships. We are made by God, for God, and in God. We are made to be together, together with the Lord, and together with one another on the way to the kingdom.